never slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play.
All right, it is Monday morning. Rise and Grind with us each and every, Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Rise and Grind morning show. Jam-packed day for you guys today. We're going to get to several topics, including what's really going on with Frank Ragnow and Alex Anzalone. This has been a hot topic over the last several days, and I did get some answers back from somebody that I always reach out to in cases like this. Identified it last night in a video, but we're going to talk about it again this morning, and it sounds like Pittsburgh still doesn't have a quarterback. Why is Aaron Rodgers, such a virus in holding this team hostage? And then, of course, your Lions news. We're going to highlight Ahmad Hassanin's conversation this weekend with a reporter and how that involves Corey this morning and get the truth, right? Get the story behind the story. Frank Ragnow hype, man. What's going to happen here? We'll be right back here in just about 15 seconds. We'll get it rolling.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fake.
Corey, what's happening? Good morning.
Good morning, brother. A little tired this morning. I don't know about you, long weekend, but yeah, happy to be up here.
Same for me, man. Very, very long weekend. We were out hunting property all weekend and houses and did parade of homes, and it's just it's a long weekend for us to kind of do all that. But yeah, it's fun. It's worth it. But yeah, Mondays, man, they come too early. I swear, Mondays always come too early. But what'd you do this weekend? Anything fun?
We'll spend time with the baby, and that's always a running around. And it was warm today. It's gonna be a little cooler, or it was warm this weekend. It's gonna be a little cooler today. But we got the splash pad out, so a lot of time out in the sun, you don't realize sucks it out of you, So
yeah, it's draining for sure.
Definitely worth the memories for sure. So ready to get back after it though.
All right, so you had a conversation, or I'm sorry, someone had a conversation with your brother. Do you want to start with that? Do we want to save that?
Sure. I mean, yeah,
either one.
I mean, the media, like we talked about last Friday, the media was able to access OTA'S for the final day of the week, and I know there were a couple people that wanted to get a conversation with my brother back during rookie camp, but weren't able to. So on SI, John Macaroon, he was able to talk to him a little bit and published an article. But within that article, and one of the questions he was talking about, having a lot of information to process and what it's like, to be a rookie during camp and how it's going for my brother. And he just talked about, learning from the veterans and all the coaches that are there and the process of making mistakes and how you kind of recover from that. And in that, he said, and the quote goes, so I literally talked to my brother, Corey, and was like, hey, I had one mental error today. I had two mental errors today. And he's like, that's just part of the process and part of learning. Go out there and have fun. And at the end of the day, the more complicated you make the game, the more it's going to be complicated. I don't remember specifically saying that, but I guess that's the message he got. And then some coaching, be physical at the point of the attack, see ball, get ball, but also understand where the ball is and also understand what you're doing. I think he's combining what I told him and some of the things I've always told him with what he is, envisioning and mentally preparing himself with this process. And so, yeah, to dive deeper into that conversation, which was something that happened, I think it was last Wednesday or Thursday. I'm not exactly sure what day it specifically happened but he had called me and was talking through some of the struggles of what it's like to go in there, and he wants the reps, man. It's hard because you want to be able to get those live reps. He wants to be able to learn by doing, and when OTAs happen, you got all those vets in there, and so you have to learn a little bit more in the background and take a little less reps. And of course, as with anything, especially the NFL, which is the top level, right, of any profession, right? When you can reach the peak, it's going to be the most difficult. It's going to be complex. It's going to be new terminology. It's going to feel like you're drinking from a freaking fire hose, and that's really what it is. And he hates making the same mistake twice, or not learning from a mistake. He hates that feeling. He hates the feeling of disappointment. He hates the feeling of, somebody looking at him saying like, can he do it? Well, he knows he can. And so, yeah, it's interesting to take a guy that's that competitive and let him know that's like, dude, this is inevitable. You will fail. You will have these challenges. You will encounter difficulties. And I guarantee the coaches understand that. They know that. They expect that. And they care more about how you respond to the issue or the mistake than the actual mistake itself. Right. And I think that's the key lesson that I wanted him to understand was there are only so many ways you can, train your soldiers, so to speak, right? During OTAs, during meetings, during, installs and to make them battle tested, kind of like, what Coach Dan Campbell's talking about with the entire schedule and how it's going to, toughen the team for the playoff run that they're going to need. How can you do that in OTAs when you can't put on pads and you can't, do the physical side? You overload them with information. You see what they can, how they process it, how they take mistakes, how they learn from their mistakes, how they take being in the middle of the depth chart and having less reps. Are you going to sit on the back and not pay attention? You're going to be taking mental reps. Are you going to learn in every way possible? And I think those are the things that he's always done and that he's having to do again now that he's back at the bottom of the totem pole and working his way back up. But I know he did have some success. There was a play talked about on the Detroit Lions website. They kind of went over OTAs and they said that he stood out on Friday. They said that there would have been he would have had a sack when he was getting those team reps. And I texted him about it later and said, hey, I heard, you had a good rep. You're going to have to show me the film on that one. He was excited and he gave me a, smiling emoji. I don't think he will show me the film on that, but because by that point it'll be long in his memory. Because one of the other things I've always told him is, focus on what you need to work on, not your successes. Because when he was an early football player, it's fun to watch your own highlights. And he had a lot of them in high school. And so, but watching film is not about watching what you did right. It's about watching what you did wrong and learning from those mistakes. And so he has since learned that and watches film in a whole new way. And it sounds like his mentality has turned that corner as well, because he's embracing the challenge of working up that depth chart. He's learning from the vets. He's, holding himself accountable and not wanting to make the same mistake twice. And using all the resources, including his coach / brother, that's always got his back. So yeah, it's a cool experience to kind of be with him through this process and then hear all the extra stuff as well. So
I have a feeling it's going to be a bit of a tiptoe situation on, things that you can share and things that you can't share. Like tape, right? I mean, man, I wish we could see tape from what they're seeing, but probably just won't get that opportunity. So, and I doubt he can share that kind of stuff with us, but that would be wonderful. Look, there's a lot of things that happen right now that I think a lot of fans, partly because of the way that I think the media addresses things at times. And when I say media, I'm talking about, your standard media here that's out there covering this stuff. I think that things get overglorified. And I don't mean that in a negative way or a positive way. I feel like, okay, let's say Ahmed goes out there and has a mistake or two, to your point, right? I think some media members are going to focus on that and just that. And then it's going to get into fans' heads like, oh my God, we took this guy in the 6th round and then he's already screwing up. Look, he's not going to be any good. You're going to hear that. You're going to get that in comments. You're going to get that in tweets. You're going to see it all over the place. Matter of fact, I've got some tweets, some conversation from this weekend that I'm going to share. That's not necessarily about your brother, but just how overglorified I think that little mistakes are and what they feel Brad Holmes has done right or wrong. And so I think the good thing is we have a first perspective here, right? We have the perspective of you being able to have a conversation with your brother and then setting the stage correct, right? Making sure that things are out there, that it's put it this way: if you're going to write about them, make sure you get it right because it will get corrected. Am I safe to say that?
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure. It's
And I'm not saying that someone wrote something wrong. I'm just saying, like,
no.
you know, like let's just make sure we get it right.
What I think is going to be fun, because I during the season, right? You kind of get to see the product on the field and make live judgments, right? And during the off season, we don't see much, so we're kind of just guessing and trying to pull things out and elaborate on what we think might be happening. I watch football differently than a lot of people. I've spent too much time around the game, and been involved so intimately with it that I know things about it that the average person wouldn't. And I can't obviously guarantee that I know what's going on behind the scenes, but I've been in enough locker rooms. I've been in enough huddles. I've been in enough meetings to know, the tendencies of coaches and how they interpret, mistakes, how they interpret losses, how they take, the challenges that a football season brings, and how that's usually, discussed amongst the team and the culture of the team. And I feel like I have a pretty good pulse on that. So it'll be interesting to see, because you're right. Fans overreact. It's part of being a fan. There's the reason a fan is because you're a fanatic. And anybody that's watching Detroit Lions football stuff 100 days away from the season and before is somebody who's passionate about the team and cares a lot. When you care a lot, you're gonna make those judgments. You're gonna want to, figure out what's going on, especially when you've had struggles that the Lions have had in the past and now have success. We want to keep it going and want to, turn that corner. Okay, how do we do that? Well, first of all, let's take a deep breath and relax and let the pros do their job, right? That includes the Brad and Dan and all of the picks that we have. They are in the process, and we get to judge their careers. We get to judge their employment because it's on a national stage. Imagine having somebody commentate or judge everything you do at work, right? Like, or you having to do a media press conference after your Friday shift, right? It's like, how did your week go? Well, on Monday, I missed that email and I got chewed out for it, but I'm not going to make that same mistake twice. I'm going to make sure I'm checking my email twice a day, and eating well, because I can't afford to do an afternoon nap every day, right? Because I got to stay on that. It's just funny. So I think it's interesting to think about the microscope that we use to be fans, and if it's actually tuned correctly all the time. I think maybe not, but hey, that's part of the fun of it, right?
Well, I think that there's a lot to take there, or a lot to take out of what you just said. But first, I got to wind back a little bit. One, just a shout out to the mods. If you could check the post that I just put in the chat. I'm not sure about a certain individual, but let me know what you find out, please. And number two, it's way too early. And being a fanatic, I think that Lions fans, number one, we've been in the dumps for a long time, and then you get the taste of success. And I feel like now a majority of fans that I do believe are in this SOL group are like, they believe that they can have everything now. And I'm not saying that we can't. I'm not saying that we don't have a team that can't get us there. But I also want to remind everyone that this is season 5 of what was a complete rebuild, right, from the scrap heap. And yes, we should be somewhere, right? It doesn't take 5 seasons to completely rebuild a team. It doesn't take 5 seasons to completely rebuild a culture. So I am going to pivot, from things that I've said in the past where, yeah, it's not Super Bowl or bust, but I'm going to say we should be knocking on the door, and we definitely should be careful about how we approach that. But to your point, fail. He's going to fail. Everyone's going to fail. Every rookie's going to fail. You have to fail to succeed. That's really been one of my mottos my entire life. I can tell you that I've probably failed more than I've had success. And to have a large amount of success in life, I think you have to fail quite a bit. And if you don't go back and watch what you're doing, look what you're doing, and react to what you're doing, then you're not going to be able to take that next step. So for him to be able to recognize it, or any rookie to be able to recognize it and try to learn from it and quickly, make an adaptation to whatever you're doing, that's just part of the process. fans, we fail too, right? We can't jump all over these guys. To your point earlier, it's OTAs. We have no clue really what's going on. The media had one day there on Friday, and it's a very short amount of time. I don't even believe it's the entire time of practice. There's usually sections of practices that are open to media, and then there's sections that are not. And that's where you're going to see, or not see because you're not there, the other things that are really going on. How coaches view, you as a player, I think is it's a critical point to make, especially right now. Are you hanging your head? Are you just trying to get back in there and make another play? I think that speaks volumes to the player and who they're going to be in the future, not just right now, but in a game. Like, you're going to hang your head and go on the sideline and throw your helmet around, or are you going to, keep that helmet locked up and ready to go? And I think that will spell volumes later. Peter Van Larhoven in the chat said, I learned to be positive, and that is something that this channel has always been about, is try to be positive. It doesn't mean that I won't react to things, right? It doesn't mean that I won't test things or put opinions out there, but largely we try to stay as positive as we can. But again, we're not going to be numb to reality. I think it's a fine balancing act. But yeah, good points on your brother this morning, and I can't wait, obviously, to see where this goes. I think I would like to transition, just kind of sticking with Lions news this morning. Do you have anything else you want to add there, or can I transition? You good?
Yeah, no, I'm not sure exactly where you're going to transition, but somebody in the chat is mentioning some contract stuff that's going around, and I don't know if that's exactly where you're heading, but yeah, perfect. So it's a perfect segue here.
Yeah, I want to transition into what everyone's been talking about. Now, I was a little late to the party on last night putting out a video, and that was by purpose. It was by design. I wanted to kind of survey the field, if you will, and get some answers from some people that I trust. Not so much about, like I stated in the video, it's not like they're sitting in the room and they know everything that's going on. But when we're talking about Frank Ragnow and Alex Anzalone, I mean, these are almost two of the exact issues that are identical, right? Two issues that are fairly identical. Alex came to this team, and he was supposed to be the first stick in the mud, if you will, that first piece of foundation that was laid to kind of help build the culture of this team and the identity, kind of set the stage for the future, right? First couple of seasons maybe didn't go as well for him, and I think we discussed this last week, that once you're comfortable in a system and the guys are doing the right thing around you, that you can finally start to play with your hair on fire and not worry about what's going on and how critical that is for a defense, let alone an offense. But for a defense, right? First, I don't know, year and a half, 18 months of Dan Campbell's, total takeover of this team. Yeah, the defense had a lot of issues. And it was noticeable with Alex Anzalone that was having some trouble. And it wasn't because he was a bad football player. And that's what you would hear from fans. Oh my goodness, you see what Alex did last night, or, missing tackles, or this. He had to worry about 6 other positions, in his vicinity, and getting these guys lined up because we had extremely young guys on the field. Really, I mean, we're the youngest football team in the NFL for the first 2 seasons. We were kind of teetering the second year between 1 and 2. But so Alex now wants a bump, right? He wants a pay increase, or he wants, a contract extension. This is all rumored. The first thing I want to throw out there, has anyone heard from Alex directly? Has anyone heard from Alex's agent directly? And I'm going to echo the same thing for Frank Ragnow. Because if neither of them have come to light and said this, then I think that we can only assume what's being written about these guys. And I think it's a fair assumption that they would love to have some sort of a contract restructure or renegotiation, given where they are in their career, given where they are in their tenure with the Detroit Lions, given, the fact of their contracts may be in final years or final year in Alex's case. Of course, they would want to bump seeing these contracts that are being handed out around them, some big money. But then the reality hits, right? And it kind of hits you like a 2x4 in the face, especially speaking with Alex Anzalone. He's 30 years old. And he's 30 years old, and yes, he's playing good football, but man, the Lions probably really need an upgrade at that position anyway. Why would the Lions want to invest another 2-3 years in Alex Anzalone? And I'm not saying that he's not a good culture guy, glue guy, he's all of that. But is he the future of this team? That's the biggest question that Dan and Brad have to answer. And I would say that the answer is no right now. It's tough for me to say that because of how much I respect Alex and how much I respect his game and what he's done for this team. But the business side says the Lions are going to get younger at that position next year. And they were probably hoping that this year wasn't going to happen with Alex, but it is. Again, all speculated. What is your initial thought on Alex? And then we'll jump into Frank.
Yeah. I think something specific about Alex that we got is his social media tweets, and we elaborate as fans, like we said, we can only assume and speculate, but when he's making the personal decision to go out and support Trey Hendrickson and kind of passively aggressively address the topic without specifically addressing the topic, he kind of leaves this room for us to assume that this is what's going on behind the scenes. Now, Dan Campbell comes out and says, I know who's not here and I know why they're not here, and our relation, everything is good and everything's fine. And, he addressed that in that media press conference on Friday before or after, whenever the OTA practice was. But that was right after he listed about 20 people that were on the injured or not practicing, participating list. So, those are kind of comparable things, right? We're not stressing out over the 20 people that were not participating in practice, but we are going to stress out about the 2 people who aren't there, even though Dan says we shouldn't stress out about it, right? Like maybe they know better than us, and maybe, yeah, Alex is going to show up to work because he's getting paid a lot of money to do it. And maybe he is a little disgruntled because he wishes he was making a couple million more and deserves a little bump, probably because of his past. But like you said, I think the only way to have sustained success in the NFL is to constantly be turning over your roster and staying young and efficient, right? With your money and with your talent. And it doesn't come from paying older players bigger contracts, because they expire, the player and the contracts, right? And you get put in a bad position. And so I'm not saying that they're not going to pay him more or restructure something or add a year or anything like that. But like you said kind of before, this was a complete rebuild, and as you get older, right, you transition, 1 or 2 years, you had the youngest group. We have so many young star players that like, as we continued that process, that's how we got here. If that is our MO, then we stick to that, right? And we get younger, and you keep those contracts lower, and that's just kind of how it works. But like we said last week, it's a business, and it sucks when guys that you really like and have been a fan of for a long time and have helped you get to where you're going aren't able to continue down that path with you into the future. But we will see. So, but Frank is a little bit different because he hasn't given us social media. The only thing I saw from Frank on social media was the last fish that he bought.
Before we get into Frank, though, I want to throw something out there.
Yeah.
If you don't mind. And it's because I feel like exactly what you just said when you say, yeah, it sucks because they helped you get there, right? And as a fan, I think that's what people hold on to. So there was a post this weekend that I responded to, and my response was this. I said, Anzalone is 30. I wouldn't expect a big deal or any deal. The Lions are trying to stay young with keeping the core intact. Dan mentioned there's 0 issues with players not at voluntary OTAs. Voluntary. They do not have to be there, right? Would it be great to be there with Casey Rodgers as, part of this team, and Calvin Shepard as your new DC? Absolutely. Would it be great to be there if you're Frank Ragnow because you've got a new OC? Probably, but Hank Fraley's still there. He's still your offensive line coordinator, which is what, or offensive line coach, which is what really matters for him. And so I said, losing Anzalone will be a big loss next year. Hopefully, Jack is ready. The only reply that I got by somebody, again, I'm not going to name names, says, we'd rather keep Anzalone at 30 than ADHD patient Jack Campbell, who has a 0 pass rush game, and at least we get veteran leadership experience and solid all-around play from Anzalone. I didn't understand the first third of this reply, but then I went into, okay, 0 pass rush game by Jack, and at least we get veteran leadership experience and solid all-around play from Anzalone. Okay, newsflash. Jack Campbell's been one of the best linebackers in the league since he's been, a part of this team. And he's entering year 3. So if you're not expecting a major increase in play from Jack, I think that would be the wrong assessment, number one. Number two, well, I'm going to come with the stats. So let me take a look at the screen here with everybody. Okay, so 0 pass rush ability from, let me throw this out there. So Anzalone on the left, Jack on the right, okay? 0 pass rush ability out of Jack. Well, let's take a look at the overall grade here. Jack Campbell, again, on the right, almost 10 points higher overall grade than Anzalone last year. Now, Anzalone only missed a few games last season. Pass rush grade, about even. If you're going to say that, this 4-point difference, still under 60 for both of them, which is not great, that Anzalone is that much better, I would say that we're barking up the wrong tree. But when you look at the run defense grade, Jack Campbell, 81.5, darn near elite. And his coverage grade, almost identical to Anzalone. Now, again, this is PFF, but when we compare two players and we compare both of their PFF grades, it's pretty solid evidence to say that there's a much bigger opportunity for Jack to grow in year 3 and to watch his ability in the pass rush game and his coverage grade and his run defense and his ability overall to be better than Alex Anzalone. Now they're playing 2 different positions, but Alex was also a Mike when he first joined this team as the leader of the defense, but Jack has been taking over those duties. Okay, so that's all I wanted to share on the stat part of it. Here's what I'll say overall about these two. I love Alex and what he does sideline to sideline. Absolutely. I do feel like he is a liability in the run game, and I think that his score in the run defense kind of shows that. Jack is just a puppy. Like, he's entering year 3, and he's been playing this good through the first 2 seasons, stays on the field, hasn't suffered any major injuries. I think the sky is much higher for Jack to be able to take over this defense. Now, I think the expectation was that it would be next year that Jack would pretty much be on his own and that Anzalone might be phased out. So when you see the stats like this, I'd like to know kind of what goes through your head. My response to this individual was, you're not really correct on the stat part, but their response was, furthermore, understand the context of who you are comparing Jack Campbell to. He was a high first-round draft pick, so you expect more, just like Brad Holmes slipped drafting Tyleik Williams this year, and other past mistakes like Broderick Martin in the 3rd round and Tesla this year. So totally ran away from my response, ran away from the fact that I proved this individual wrong with the stats, and starts talking about other players. Brad didn't slip on Tyleik Williams. Brad didn't slip on Broderick Martin. And we'll touch on that for just a hot second this morning. We have no idea who Isaac Tesla or Tyleik Williams are yet. They're rookies. But to say that he slipped, Brad has never slipped in a draft. And that's why I threw up all the All-Pro and the Pro Bowl stats that we'll talk about in a minute. But before we get that far, looking at the stats, then understanding what you do about these two players, what would you say in response to this gentleman on Twitter, to my reply when I said that he was off on the stats and kind of taking a deeper look at what both of these guys do on the field?
Yeah, first to address the first part of, you said you couldn't understand the first part of his.
Yeah, the ADHD, it didn't make any sense.
I think it's funny because as a person who has ADHD, right? Like, I know very well what he is trying to get at. And it sounds like he might have ADHD the way this man is bouncing from topic to topic. But honestly, if my linebacker, and we're just going to pretend that this comment is true, if I have a linebacker that has ADHD, you know how fast he could process information and take on multiple things at a time? I kind of want my middle linebacker to be able to have ADHD and control it, because it can be a superpower at times, right? Like, it can really be an advantage. And I think the way you process information is different. The way you key on patterns is different. And as a middle linebacker, that is a skill you want. Like, you want to be able to diagnose plays quickly. You want to be able to react without having to think, right? You want to be able to like I said, understand tendencies and patterns and things like that. So if that is true, then great. Jack's about to be a Hall of Famer, right? Because I think exactly what you said. When you got a young guy that's going into his third year, it's like the you don't know, but if we're even now, right? If you got an older racehorse and you got a younger racehorse, right? And they're both in training, and one's kind of on the decline, but they're hanging with each other in the race. Which horse do you want to bet your money on for the future? Do you want to bet it on the young horse that's already up to here, right? Or you want to bet it on the older horse just because he's won races in the past, right? Like I don't think that's how football teams have longevity of success in the NFL, right? You are constantly developing the next talent. And I'm not saying that Alex and Jack are the same player or playing the same position and all these things, but it's like, if I'm betting my money on a horse, I'm putting it on the younger guy who still has room to grow within the NFL, not the guy who has probably at his peak, if not, very, very close to it. And we've kind of already seen everything he has to do, right? Like, to give. So
let me throw something out on that point. So I think that you would be paying Alex for what he's done in the past, but even if you go back and look at his past, even as a Detroit Lion, in 21, his grades all the way across the board were below 46. Some in the 30s. Overall grade was a 35. In 20, and a bad defense, right? Terrible team. In 2022, he didn't have a grade over 65, and that was his pass rush grade. In 2023, he had pretty good grades, right? 68 overall, 72 pass rush, 67 run defense, 65 coverage. That's the best season he's ever had, ever. If you go back and look at the first 3 seasons for Alex Anzalone, Jack has had a better first 2 years than Alex has, in my opinion, but also based on the statistical analysis. Also, I want to point out that Jack is 6 years younger than Alex. Of course you want the pony that's growing, right? The guy that's younger, that's showing that he can do it at a high level. Continue on with your statement, and then I want to follow up on the comment in this reply about pass rush. Corey.
Wait, well, I'm sorry. I was reading the chat.
I said go ahead, continue on with what you're saying, and then I wanted to comment on the pass rush, or I can just continue going.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't really have much more to say other than, they talked to that comment and then went on to talk about, other players slipping in the draft and Brad slipping and taking guys that, you're not going to hit on 100. So if Broderick Martin, taking him in the 3rd round and him not panning out is the best critique you have, like, okay, good luck. You have, like you said, you haven't seen Isaac Tesla play at all. So we don't even know what he is. And yeah, okay, you can question, what we gave up to get him. One of those picks was what we gave up because our DC got hired as a head coach, and he happens to be a certain ethnicity, which is like the most random thing I've ever heard of, to have that as part of like your structure.
To have that as part of the bylaws. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either.
So good. I want to give away a bonus pick that shouldn't probably, if it, like, I don't know, like that's a whole nother ball game, but Tyleek going in the 1st round. Yeah. Okay. When a run of 5D linemen has already gone in the 1st round, your hand gets forced a little bit. And if you don't adapt to that, and
not picking till 60 though. That's the thing. Lions weren't picking till 60.
Exactly.
So it's pick now, or you're definitely not going to get a top dog, right?
Exactly. So you have to reach, maybe not reach, but you have to ebb and flow with the draft, right? And so, yeah, taking Tyleek in the 1st round doesn't look glamorous. And it's like, is he a 1st round talent? Well, yeah, he's a 1st round talent when the next D lineman you would have got would have been a 5th round talent potentially, right? That's what you needed to get out of this draft. So again, this is something that fans say what fans want to say, and social media has given us a platform to hear every opinion, whether it should be heard or not. So that's the best part.
I'm going to get lost in the translation this morning because there's so much going on in this chat and so much bouncing through my head. So I'm going to try to stay on pace, but let me speak to Broderick Martin's situation for just a brief moment. Don't think in terms of him as a 3rd round draft pick. Broderick Martin was essentially a 4th round draft pick, like early 4th round. He's picked at number 96 overall. And what the Lions traded up to get him was not that much. When you consider what they just gave up to get Isaac Tesla, they gave up even more, right? To move up to get Tesla versus what they moved up to get Broderick Martin. I don't know if you know this stat. Maybe you do. But 3rd round picks generally don't play a ton, hardly start unless you're on a team. If you're a 3rd round pick for the Detroit Lions in 2021 or 2022, you're on the field, right? Because we didn't have a team. You're going to be on the field. 3rd round picks on a team for the Eagles probably aren't going to play. 3rd round picks for the Chiefs probably aren't going to play. 3rd round picks for the Ravens probably aren't going to play. 3rd round picks for the Detroit Lions in 2025 probably are not going to play a whole lot, depending on the room that they're joining. But overall, when you look at the statistic that measures how often 3rd round picks start in the NFL, it's less than 15% of the time that they become a starter, period, ever throughout their career. So I think that should tell you something, that you can't reach for a position or a player or a time in the draft that doesn't really play. And I think what's going on here is it's the defensive end SOL fan base that is saying we needed a defensive end. We took Broderick Martin, and Brad traded up to grab Broderick Martin. We needed a defensive end instead, opposite of Aiden. It's this, kick the horse when it's dead and down, conversation that keeps on happening every single day that Brad has missed on not bringing a defensive end in. I'm sorry, but the proof is there. The evidence is there. What you're saying, in my opinion, not you, Corey, but everyone else out there, you're wrong. You're flat out wrong. You build the defensive line through the interior out. They happened to grab Aiden at a time when they had some early draft picks, and they weren't going to miss on that pick, and they did the right thing by bringing Aiden in. Since then, they've been trying to build the interior of that defensive line. If you notice what Brad has done every single season, and he's tried to build the defensive line by grabbing Levi, right, grabbing Pascal, those players suffered injuries. So they couldn't hit the field fully to help Aiden or anybody else. Had they been healthy, I don't think we're having this conversation right now. Because even seeing what Pascal and Levi did last year, had they been healthy in their rookie seasons, it's a different conversation. Now we're at the point where the interior is built. Unfortunately, we have an injury to Aleem McNeil. So Tyleik Williams, not a reach at all. I called the pick. I had Tyleik number 1 on my list from the first day of Combine when I went down there, and I was sitting next to Maureen, and she could verify, right? I mean, I showed her my list. Is Tyleik. I said it was Tyleik from day 1 that was going to be the best defensive tackle out of the first round. And then as we started going through the process of mock drafts, it was Tyleik that I thought that would go to the Lions if he was there at 28, and a couple of defensive ends were gone, namely Shamar Stewart, Jalon Walker, and some others. And all of that panned out. The Lions had opportunities to move up. Nobody would allow them to pull the trigger. The Lions had opportunities to move back. Brad knew that if he moved back, he was going to miss out on a game changer in Tyleik Williams. The other part that I want to say, and kind of commenting on what this individual was saying in this texter, back to me, was Brad Holmes is really starting to lose his touch in these drafts. And this year, it wasn't in the late rounds. It was in the early rounds, although we don't have any scouting on their 2nd overall pick, the guard from Georgia. Why don't we have scouting? What do you mean we? Who's we? Are you in the room? Because I can guarantee you this, they have scouting on Tate Rowledge. The 3rd are straight. He said that the guard from Georgia and the third round pick are trash, bad deals. Dude, I don't think this person understands how it works in the NFL, but the Lions now have probably the deepest and the best offensive line in the league. And thank God they brought in Tate Rowledge, because if there really is an issue with Frank Ragnow, Tate's getting his shot playing center early. Now, I'm not going to read into that too much. There's a reason why. I'll explain it in a minute. But to kind of wrap up this part on Alex Anzalone, in the whole draft process, let me go back to my notes. See, I told you I was going to get off on a tangent here. I think that we have to understand that Brad is building a team for now and later. Famous candy from the 90s, now and later. And that's exactly what he's doing. He has to build it for today, and then he has to build it to sustain what's happening today. He's done that. For all of you out there, I'm telling you right now, if you want to if we want to have some bets on this program, I'm going to tell you right now that Davenport is going to make y'all look foolish this year. And I'm also going to tell you that Tyleik Williams, since you don't like the pick, is going to make you look foolish this year. I'm willing to put some things out there just to prove my point. Now, they have to stay healthy, but if both of those players stay healthy, I think a lot of the fans that are out there crying over a defensive end, they're going to be excited what these two players do this year. And they won't admit it. They won't admit it. And I'll say this again. Don't root for this team when they're winning football games and those two players are playing well, right? Don't get excited and root for this team when our 6th round pick is playing well, when our 3rd round pick is playing well, when our 2nd round pick is playing well. Because what you're saying now and what you've said the last month or two, that's just called being hypocritical. And that's the part of this fan base that I don't understand. They will trash Brad Holmes till they're blue in the face, pun intended. And then when it turns around into the season and we're winning 15 football games and we've got the 1 seed, they're jumping out of their chairs and they are loading social media with love over the Detroit Lions when you just trashed them for 6 months. It doesn't make any sense to me. You're either in or you're out. You're out. You know what I mean? So anything you want to say on that? And then I want to transition to Frank.
No, I think it's fun to have some discourse, right, amongst the fan base.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's necessary as like a checks and balances. If I know, like, we got people, there's a little debate going on in the chat, and sometimes it's nice to have Mike Ditka's Fury in here to give us what the other side might be thinking, right? And sometimes it's maybe your own fan base that's like questioning decisions. That is not a bad thing to have, and it's okay to look at it if it's handled respectfully, right? And the debate goes, civilly. I think it's good to have a give and take and question our interior. And then when it goes right, like you're saying, right, you don't have to be like, I told you so, but the person on the wrong side of the debate will know, right? They will know when they're cheering and then they don't realize that, hey, like, I was questioning this decision. I look kind of foolish. Let them, right? Let them walk themselves into that trap. And if they're right, then maybe we reconsider our, blind faith. But I don't think it's blind at this point for Brad, right? Like, we've seen he has had these picks pan out year after year after year. And again, like you said, you're not going to hit every single pick, right? But just like in baseball, and you're the baseball guy, this is a law of averages, right? And if you can get hits a majority of the time, you are not only making it to the Hall of Fame in baseball, you're making it to the Hall of Fame as a GM, right? Like, if you can be right more than you're wrong, even 50%, right? Over 500, then you are winning as a GM and you're keeping your job and you're putting successful players out on the football field. Because, like, I'm not sure if people are aware, but NFL teams grade players throughout their entire careers, right? Like, when they understand a guy's going to be an NFL player or has the potential to be an NFL player, they grade them before their season, then they grade them again after their season. And they're basically saying, we think this guy's ceiling is here. We think he could be a journeyman. We think he could be an all-pro. We think he could be a Hall of Fame caliber player because of these things we see. But even those grades are wrong, right? Even those analytics are constantly proven wrong. We have guys who have gone undrafted and now in the Hall of Fame. How does that happen if every, scouting and report and, GM's board was correct? It doesn't, or else every guy who would get drafted exactly where they end up at the end of their career. And that's just not how sports work. That's just not how humans work. That's just not how, that's why we love the game. And so it's fun to sit here and say, oh, Brad does this or didn't do this. But if you don't look at the facts and you don't hold yourself accountable for those opinions, then
that's it.
First of all, you're not in reality. And then second of all, like understand that we are all going to be wrong. And we would like to be right all the time, but that's just not going to happen. And these players will go out there and prove. They're not here to prove us right or wrong. They're there to make a career and prove who they are. And whether that, not every guy can get picked in the first round. Not every guy, right? There's so many things that we can get into this and go super deep, but it's like, let these dudes go out there and prove to all of us who they are, no matter where they were picked, no matter, how much we gave up to get them. They are Detroit Lions now, right? And because of what our leadership, who, like you recently noted, had just rebuilt a team from one of the worst teams in the NFL to now one of the best. And that's not me saying it. That is based on the facts, right? We were losing a lot of games, and now we were winning a lot of games last year, and that's with a ton of injuries. And every, prognosis for this season has us within the top 5 teams from what we've seen, power rankings and things. So that's not me saying it. That's the media saying it. That's other teams around the league saying it. That's even other teams within our division saying it. So it's like whether we want to have discourse and talk about it, and we can call out things, the facts are the facts. And until somebody knocks Brad off of his throne, he's going to continue to be confident, right? Because he's done it. He's shown us he could do it. And I'm going to continue to be confident in that as well. And so, we're talking, I think in the chat, they were talking about salary cap and things like that. It's like, yes, these are good problems to have, right? Yes, we're going to be over the cap and we need to restructure things. And that explains a lot. But man, like when you're winning, those are the problems we want to have, right? We don't want to have to be rebuilding.
We have good problems. We don't have. The Lions don't have bad problems per se. They have good problems, to your point. You just brought up a few things that, whether you want to call it media or the analysts, right, the PFFs, the ESPNs, everyone that puts out, all of their thoughts, their ideas of what's going to happen. Let's just start with the draft. Mel Kiper, Daniel Jeremiah, who I absolutely love. Daniel Jeremiah, I think he's great at what he does. But all these guys that put out all the mock drafts, including myself, why are all of them pretty much wrong, right? Nobody really knows where these guys are going to go, to your point earlier. The only thing that I can tell you guys in the chat that is a fact, which the people that have been around this show, that have been watching me now for 3 drafts, well, in 2022, I picked the 5 players that we drafted. Last year, I got Terrion Arnold and Sione Vaki right. Both of those years, I pegged exactly what was going to happen in the offseason. This last year, called it live. You can watch it. Tyleik Williams in the first, right? All the other players that I got right in the first round, 26 out of 32 players in the first round I got right doing it live. Why am I getting a few things right more than others? I don't know. Maybe I just see the field differently, but that is not normal. There's a reason why all of us will get things wrong. There's a reason why all of you will get things wrong. But the difference maker, the thing that you just said that really stands out, is holding yourself accountable, right? So when we get something wrong, be the first one to put your hand up and say, man, I got it wrong. But no, instead what happens with this fan base is they continue to just drive a nail deeper and deeper and deeper into the fan base, talking about defensive ends every other word. And how it's just dividing this fan base instead of saying, look, I've been screaming for this every year. Have you ever stopped to think that if the Lions would have done that, the players that we wouldn't have had and the players that wouldn't be on this team and the games we probably wouldn't have won? So you have to think about that too. Every action has a reaction, especially in the NFL. Every player you bring in is going to set things in motion for other players not to end up here. So think about that for a moment. Had you got your second defensive end that you wanted on the opposite side of Aiden, what players wouldn't we have had? Jameer? Jameson? I think we want both of those players. At least for right now, we want Jameson, right? We don't know what's around the corner. And I'm not just singling him out. I could say the same thing about Jameer because you don't know when, or what it's going to cost to retain him, right? So anyway, I'll leave that with that. So Frank Ragnow. Let me just double check how we're doing on likes. If you guys do us a huge favor, get us up to 75 or at least 75%. We got about 100 people watching at certain times. If we can get 75 likes, at least up to 65 likes, I'll get ads turned off. It's what we like to do every morning show so that you guys don't have to go through this balancing act of ads. We like to give back, and that's just one of the ways that we like to do it. Let's talk about Frank Ragnow for a moment. I got off on a huge tangent there on Alex and all the other things that are involved. So Frank, I reached out to one of the guys that I trust, and I'm not going to give out names, just like, anybody else. They're not going to give out names of who they talk to. Former executive in the league. So he's a guy that's been in the rooms, right? Understands what's going on at a high level. And I just asked him a simple question or two or three, right? Of what does he think about these contract issues? Well, my screen keeps doing this. What does he think about these contract issues with Frank and others? And the simple answer that he gave me up front was, and it's kind of what I said in the video, who has talked to their agent and who has talked to them directly outside of Brad or Dan or the contract team within Allen Park? Who's spoken to them directly? And I think so far the answer, Corey, is nobody. I haven't seen one thing written so far that says I spoke to directly. I spoke to Alex or I spoke to Frank directly. This is what they told me. So where is this rumor, mill getting started from? Now, I love Dave Burkett. I think he's one of the best writers, in Detroit. He's been doing it for a very long time. I trust a lot of what he writes. And someone just made me aware that when the whole JMO stuff was going down this year, that he was, I guess, the initial source for the whole JMO stuff. And now he was the initial source for the Frank Ragnow issues. And I'm not saying to question it, but I am saying to question it, right? Like, let's look at it, from the 30,000 foot view for a second. He signed a contract. Frank Ragnow signed a contract back in 2021 that back then, it was one of the best contracts in the league, especially for a center. Even today, even after 4 years have gone by, even today, he is still one of the highest paid centers in the league. The issue is he doesn't have any guaranteed money left on his deal if he gets injured. Now, I'm sure there's injury clauses that would protect him. I just don't know what they are. Like, I don't have a copy of the contract to say, okay, yep, if he gets injured, he's going to get X amount of dollars no matter what. I don't know what that is. So I get it. Look, you're making $9.15 million. That is a far cry from the top pay in the league, which is about $18 million a year. Of course he wants more money. But what this individual told me is that it sounds like this isn't about Frank wanting to be the highest paid. Now, I'm going to put these comments in the same structure of, have you spoke to him directly? Because he hasn't. So he can't tell me that he has direct information. This is just what he's hearing from other high-level executives around him or, people that he knows around the league. That Frank doesn't want to be the highest paid guy. And even if he does, the Lions could do it. But what does that impact? Just like Alex Anzalone. If you want to give him the most money or a significant amount of money compared to other linebackers, who else does that impact? Because next year, you have a boatload of guys that want or need extensions if you want to keep them around for the long term because they weren't drafted in the first round. And some of the guys that were drafted in the first round, Jamison Williams, will be on a fifth-year option. But, guys like Jahmyr Gibbs are open for negotiation, and he's been one of the best running backs in the league now for 2 seasons. Even though he didn't clean up a bunch of yards last year, you can clearly see he's one of the best in the league. So that's where the conversation went. One, has anybody spoken to them directly? Two, that it doesn't appear that Frank wants to be the highest paid guy, that it's more so about the guarantee, and mentioned that if the Lions were to guarantee all of his contract right now and then add an extra year so that they can also add some void years and things like that within the renegotiated contract, that it would help the Lions. But the bigger issue is he feels his agent and himself are looking at this team and saying, holy cow, if we don't do something now, look at all these other players that are about to get paid. There's a ton of money that could exit, Allen Park next year to the tune of about 100 million APY in 2026. If they don't strike now, the pot is empty. The Lions have about 76 million speculated for 2026. largely because they have about 40 million on the books right now that they could roll over. But you're talking Aiden Hutchinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta, Brian Branch, all players you want to keep, right, Corey? I would assume. So how are the Lions going to be able to balance all of this? They probably, if there is a real issue, didn't expect that it was going to come to a head right now. And I am going to throw out again the word voluntary. If we get into mid-July or let's just say a mandatory minicamp and Ragnow's not there, that's going to be cause for concern. But if he has an agreement, if there's contract negotiations going on, the one thing that I learned from this weekend that I've known, but he reminded me, players don't show up during contract negotiations for the most part because depending on what their other contract looks like, because if they get injured, that's going to derail the whole thing. Jordan Love, like I said in the video, that's kind of what you're looking at. Last year wasn't really in camp doing things until that contract was done. Wasn't going to risk an injury because if he gets injured, guess what? That contract's not happening now. Sad to say, but that's just kind of what happens in the NFL. So I think that there's a whole bunch of nothing burger going on with Frank Ragnow, especially to Dan's point, but even to Dan Campbell's point where he says that he's spoken to the guys that were not in camp and there's really not an issue here. Dan's not going to say anything different. Let's just be real. He's not going to say that there's a problem. And like he said, the conversations that I have with those guys, I'm not going to tell you what that was, and I'm going to drive that home today. We hear from certain channels, publications that the conversation with X, Y, and Z, with Dan or Brad, and this is what happened. And well, you just heard Dan say it on live TV that any conversations he has with players, nobody will know about it, not even the media. So let's get that out of our heads right now, that anyone coming out and saying that they know exactly what's going on, they are full of you-know-what. Now, to wind this back, Corey, what do you think about Frank Ragnow? Honestly, you could take the information that I got and wind it up in a neat little bow and throw it out the window too. But
what I think you must have timed this perfectly because an article literally just dropped within the last 10 minutes from Mike Payton of A to Z Sports, and he went on there and saying, who would have guessed that fans were going to turn on Frank Ragnow, right? Who's been a culture guy for forever. And what he goes on to say is, pump your brakes and realize that it's maybe not as big a deal as you think. And he commented some of the same things you said. He said, his contract for next year is 9.25 or 9.25 million, 0.25 million. And that's not a ton for an all-pro center. Especially when he's not getting any guaranteed money, like you said. So 9.25 now, 11.75 next year. He's probably worth, Mike says here, in 14.5 to 15 million. That was a quote he had from a cap analyst, Joshua Quepo, about Ragnow's contract. So he's kind of evaluating what he's making and having no guarantees versus what he's probably worth as far as contracts go. And Mike goes on to say that all they really would need to do is move a little bit of his contract cash forward, like you were saying, and guarantee it, making him feel more valuable, not extending him past 2 years from now when he'll be 31 years old, but just renegotiating, kind of like what you've seen with Travis Kelce and Derrick Henry. It would, and he goes on to say that the cost would be about 4.65 million in cash and cap this year, which we have that money to give to him. And so if you can, appease one of your best players and one of your veteran leaders, and especially as we have Tate Ratledge coming in and wanting to, learn those positions and maybe the heir apparent, it'd be great to solidify that contract and maybe give a guy, this is when you can give a guy not what he deserves for his past, but what he deserves for right now, right? For what we need for him right now. And it's not really adding any more to the back end and putting us in trouble later on, as some of those contracts come around. You talked about the money that's leaving next year, but we're talking about renegotiating those contracts. And as Brent was saying, we're in 2026, we're already predicted to be over the cap, even with the adjustments that happen every year. And so we got to be thinking out into the future and how can we mitigate some of that issue while still maintaining these relationships now.
Time out
Yeah,
one
it
sec.
could,
Time out
yeah.
one second. Brent, can you throw something in the chat? I don't know if you can throw a link in there or maybe email me. Who speculated that we're going to be over the cap?
Well, if you just look at the Detroit Lions salary cap for 2026, it just even they're projected to be over 40 million over the cap in 2026. And he's saying that the adjustment is about 30, where it's predicted to be about 30 million to add to the cap next year. So that if we're over
Right.
by 40 and then you add the 30, we'll still be over 10. That's what it's saying.
So here's what I have in 2026. What are you looking at? Spot track or over the cap?
I just pulled it up to over the cap. Yeah.
So what I see is minus 37.6 million. So what this doesn't include, from what I understand, is it doesn't include any of the dead cap potential for next year. So that number could grow even further. It also doesn't include the rollover from this year, which right now we have 40 million sitting in the bank from this year that could roll over to next year. And then you also have next year's bump, which, yeah, it's probably going to be about 30 million again, as we're expecting. So if the Lions have 40 million rolling over, adding 30 million next year, that's 70 million to offset this 37.6 million in negative cap space, not including the dead cap. So what I see is the Lions potentially have about 40 million. It's been projected to be about 76 million, but 40 million before anything else is done with contract negotiations. I'm willing to bet all of you that Jared Goff gets a renegotiated contract next year to make space, because his cap hit is 69 million. So I'm sure that that's probably going to get renegotiated. But yeah, I would love to see what else is going on out there. Sorry to get off on another tangent. We've literally gotten through about 2 subjects this morning out of 15. So what else were you going to say there? Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. It's fine to go there. I just think, like it may not be as difficult to get those contract, concerns, mitigated and move forward with Frank. I think like you said, or like Mike said, it's interesting to see how quickly fans will turn on guys, not turn on them, but like critique them and say that they might be expendable just because something comes up about them possibly wanting more money. I think if, again, taking the analogy of like, take your own job into account, would you like a raise? I think everyone here would say, yes, that would be nice.
Of course, everyone. Yeah, of course, everyone wants a raise.
Worth more money. So yeah, it's interesting that our contracts are not negotiated in the public eye, because maybe some of us would get fired and we wanting a raise and we wouldn't have a job anymore. We'd get let go because of contract negotiations.
Yeah. So let me point out a few things. If you guys haven't watched the video, please do. I published it last night. I was trying to sit on it and try to gather as much info as I could. Couple more things. Tate Ratledge. So I've also heard that there's been a lot of hubbubaloo. I don't even like using that word, but I'm going to use it today. About Tate Ratledge taking snaps at center at rookie minicamp and during OTA'S, voluntary. I don't know why this is a thing. Like, if he's one of the only guys there, you've got Graham Glasgow. I think Graham Glasgow was in-house too, because he wasn't on the missing list. They're going to get these guys early reps as much as they can, especially a second-round pick who can play center, has played center. But what I heard, and some of the social media stuff flying around is, well, Tate Ratledge is just going to take over for Frank Ragnow, and the Lions are, going to edge Frank Ragnow out this year. I don't think so. Look, they're going to get him ready because they need to have him ready. That would be the smart thing to do. Frank Ragnow is our center, and Hank Fraley always gets these guys cross-trained early in camps. So this is, again, it's a big nothing burger. Tate is going to get some reps. The Lions need to know what they have here, but we also have to think, how many guys are in camp that can play the position? Someone has to snap the ball to the quarterback, right? If you don't have another center on the roster or at least another center that's in camp, you got to have someone do it. So let's not get too far off the tracks here. I think that it's great to have Tate, ready to rock and roll. And yeah, if he ends up being our center of the future, great. But I don't think that's going to happen right now. My biggest concerns over Frank Ragnow, I couldn't think of the issue last night. My memory was escaping me, but he's got this plantar plate problem. It's pretty bad. That's really Frank's biggest injury risk issue every year. And it's that plate that's kind of like on the pad of your feet, right? And it's missing all the cartilage from what I've read and the reports from the past. There's nothing to fix it. So you can get anti-inflammatory injections. I don't know if they're allowed cortisone throughout the year. They might be. But that's about all he can do is ice, rest, and possibly some allowed injections that the NFL allows. But it's not fixable. Not now, not ever. And so that is the biggest issue that I think the Lions face is if that ear, rears its ugly head, then we have a problem because that's going to take Frank down. Now, in the 2023 NFC Championship run, he was playing with that issue and a knee issue. And I mean, that's why Frank is so valuable to this team. He would not get out of the game. He would not leave. He was going to play no matter what. Then after that game, and we lost, there was a speculation of him retiring because of what he said in his final press conference after the game. A couple weeks later, that was again a non-issue. I think the Frank Ragnow issue is a non-issue. I think the Alex Anzalone issue is a non-issue. I think both these guys will probably get a little bit of a bump, and then it is what it is after that. The Lions are going to try to stay young. Of course, they want to keep veteran leadership around as long as possible. But unfortunately, it's a business. Things are going to happen. I can't tell you with my magic 8-ball when that happens. But both of these guys will not be on the roster at some point soon. How soon? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. The only people that know is Alex and Frank, really, and Dan and Brad. Those are only 4 people that really know. Anything else on those 2 subjects before we actually get into some other topics potentially here?
No, we can move on.
All right.
I know. Deep breath.
Yeah.
Monday.
Yeah, I just kind of get sick. I forgot one more thing about the drafting. So the text that I got through the Twitter, of the SOL fan base is what I'm going to chalk it up to be, is getting it wrong on Brad Holmes. Let me remind you guys of something. 2024, we had 6 All-Pros. 2023, we had 5 All-Pros. 2022, Khalif Raymond was an All-Pro. And in 2021, our rookie, Penei Sewell, was an All-Pro. And our tight end, TJ Hawkinson, was an All-Pro. So in the first 4 seasons under Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, getting things right, some of these players were leftovers that they kept. Well, they had to have a good eye to make sure that these players were going to work out, right? So evaluating them before the process and then after the process and keeping them on the roster takes a special, I think it's a special knowledge and understanding of the game and the team and the player to know that you wanted them to stick around. But that is 11, 12, that is 14 All-Pros in the last 4 seasons that the Lions have had. And a majority of them, players that the Lions drafted. Pro Bowls, you can also look at Pro Bowls. We've had countless Pro Bowls. I think that we deserve more. But again, a lot of the players that the Lions have drafted. So it's a big shout out, in my opinion, to the personnel at hand that are doing these contracts, that are able to keep these guys in-house. Mike Disner, Brad Holmes, Chris Spielman, like everyone that's back there doing this stuff, ensuring that these guys can stay in the house. They're the ones that I think that are responsible and deserve a big round of applause for making sure that the Lions could continue to have sustained success. And if Brad Holmes was so bad at drafting, tell me why only 2 players that he's drafted since 2021 are not on the team. Only 2. Tell me another team that is that successful, and tell me another team that is as successful as the Lions have been with All-Pros, Pro Bowls, stat leaders, yada, 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 right? I don't know of another one. I'm sure you could probably throw the Eagles in there because, Howie's really good at what he does, and you could probably throw the Chiefs in there. They're really good at what they do. The Bills, I think, are getting there. But there's not a whole lot of teams out there that are retaining guys that are having this much success that were drafted by Brad Holmes or obtained in free agency. That's the big difference. Comments on that?
No, I think that stat about only having 2 guys that he has drafted no longer on the team. It's just goes to show that you're getting guys that fit, that contribute, and that are worth where you drafted them, or even re-signing them. We have a ton of young talent, and when you look at other rosters, it's not that way, and it's not just great for now, it's great for later too. And like we said earlier, the problems of having to re-sign guys and who to re-sign, those are only problems you have when you draft well, right? You don't re-sign, you don't argue about re-signing players and who's worth it if these players aren't worth re-signing. And so it's like it's an embarrassment of riches to some extent, right? Of having a lot of young talent, and the we want to like project what they're going to be, and obviously that's unfair, right? You can't project always and predict what's going to happen, but the way we've set ourselves up and what Brad has done, it is a master class of how to run a football team and do your job. And so it's going to take more than him to win a Super Bowl, but he's doing his part, setting us up with young, successful, contributors. And I think the guys that we drafted this year will continue that trend. And some of these questions will not be being asked in the future, because we will have more data to show that what's going on has been successful and will continue to be.
Yeah, exactly right. One more thing to point out here. Brent mentioned in the chat only having 39 guys under contract for 2026. Now, I'm not picking on you, Brent, but I've looked at this stat myself, and I'm actually pretty impressed that we have 39 guys under contract for 2026. When you go back to look at the last 4 seasons, like that's the most that we've had under contract ever leading into a season. A lot of teams don't have that. So the fact that we have 39 guys, and I want to make sure that I'm clear on this, that's the most we've had under contract leading into a season under this regime. I think last year we had 30. I think the year before that we had 26. The year before that, maybe around the same, 26. That's not enough. The more guys you have under contract, the less salary cap matters. Does that make sense? If you got 39 guys under contract, that means only 12 more contracts matter for the top 51. So I think we're in great shape. I'm glad you pointed that out, because I think that we're in great shape for 2026 moving forward. Okay, so we kind of started with a lot of Lions news. I want to move into one other thing, and that is this trade with Bryce Huff and why that matters. My voice needs a little bit of a break. Can you talk to us about the Steelers for a moment?
Yeah,
and I'm gonna grab a drink real quick.
Yeah, go for it. You were going to talk about Bryce Huff. I'm going to talk about my boy Aaron Rodgers. I know you guys probably have some strong feelings about Aaron Rodgers here, being Detroit Lions fans. You got to see a lot of him in Green Bay. But we've seen what Aaron Rodgers has done since Green Bay, right? His stint with the Jets, I think everyone can agree. No one wanted to see how that first season played out. That was one of probably the most memorable moments, in the last 5 seasons. Watching him tear his Achilles and then all the drama that came around, as he tried to recover and come back. And then kind of the position he put the Jets in with their quarterback search, and whether that was demanding all of his receivers come over from other teams and demanding that they trade for Devontae Adams and demanding how the offense was run. It was not a good situation. And then we even got to hear about how Aaron Glenn handled that meeting with him. Aaron Rodgers came out. If you watched the Netflix documentary, it wasn't on the Netflix documentary, but he was talking about that, and he was talking about his meeting with Aaron Glenn, how he just told him, like, we're moving in a different direction, and didn't really even give him the time of day. Aaron Rodgers flew out there and did all this stuff and got like a 10-minute meeting and was gone. Honestly, I don't know if Aaron Rodgers deserves anything better than that treatment, because the way that he's currently treating the Pittsburgh Steelers and the negotiations on if or if not he is going to play football in Pittsburgh this year is just downright disrespectful, right? Like, as far, if my best friend is it's a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and diehard at that. And we talked about, what would he want as his quarterback option moving forward? Would he want Aaron Rodgers? Would he want, did he want Justin Fields before they got rid of him to the Jets, right? Is he okay with Mason Rudolph being their quarterback? Or would he want somebody like Kirk Cousins to come in? Or what about their rookie prospect, Will Howard? He said anybody but Aaron. Anybody but Aaron. And that's because Aaron Rodgers is a cancer. And there was a video that came out. It was Peter King and Mike Florio of NFL on NBC. They're going out there and they are talking about the Steelers don't have a good option. There is no right answer when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback situation. And Pittsburgh was brought up in the chat earlier about, how they always have regular season success. They always are above 500 and make the playoffs and then fizzle out. And they haven't won a Super Bowl in a really long time. And they're the middle ground. And I was talking to you, Will, just before the show about the Detroit Lions have been the opposite. They are either the bottom or now they're at the top, but they never really been on the middle ground. And I don't know whether I'd rather be there, right? Constantly slightly overperforming team that always fizzles out, or be a team that is either chasing a Super Bowl or busting, right? Like, completely. I think that this whole Aaron Rodgers situation in Pittsburgh, it's unfortunate for Steelers fans because they are some great fans. They truly do love their team. I think Mike Tomlin is a great coach. I think, to be honest, I think getting rid of George Pickens was a good move. I'm not a big fan of DK Metcalf and making him the star of the offense, but they're in a slightly rebuilding mode. If you look at their roster, you don't rebuild with cancer. And I say that like figuratively and literally, right? You get rid of the cancer on football teams to make your team better. You get rid of cancer in your life to improve your health. You don't add it to the equation and get better and get more successful. Now, Aaron Rodgers, great quarterback, great physical tools on a football field. Some of the intangibles, though, aren't worth it. And we talked about Caleb Williams. We talked about, for a long time, and the Bears and how, and we see some of those same diva qualities. I think I'm going to just call them straight out diva. We see some of those same things in Caleb that we saw in Aaron Rodgers, this bravado, this false sense of like, I'm better than anybody could even imagine type of thing. Like, I'm God's gift to quarterbacking. I don't think Caleb quite is there yet because he hasn't done anything to back that up. But Aaron Rodgers truly thinks that he's like that thing. And you could see it in the way he's playing out this weird dance he's doing with the Steelers. If he now goes to Pittsburgh after missing, the entire offseason, if he holds out and waits till training camp and then just shows up, how does that make you feel if you're a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers team? How does that make you feel if you have to now go share a locker room with the dude? Is he really bought into the success of the program, or is he worried about Aaron Rodgers? And how is that going to be the leader of your football team? We all know inevitably that's what a quarterback is. They become the leader. Inherently, it's just part of the role. If that is your leader and he just showed up on the boat to be the captain at the end, right before embarking, right, and you give him full control of the ship, are you trusting it? I'm asking you, Will, I'm asking the chat, as Detroit Lion fans, I know how you feel about Aaron Rodgers, but what if this happened to us, right? What if we were, think about the GM there. We're questioning Brad and his drafting. What would you be thinking about our GM if he was dancing with a quarterback of that type, of that caliber, and the future of the franchise, putting it in risk like that? I don't know. For me, it's like, bro, I'm done with Aaron Rodgers. He can retire and I'll never worry again. But
Exactly. For me, Corey, I think you asked the question, right? Or you said that we are questioning what Brad Holmes is doing drafting. Let me be clear. I'm not. But
yeah,
what he's saying is a lot of Lions fans are questioning what Brad Holmes is doing. And then to your point about the Steelers and Aaron Rodgers, yeah, to answer the question, if Brad Holmes was flirting with anybody not named Aaron Rodgers, but let's say similar situation, and they're doing this dance, and they're just going around in circles, and it's getting the fan base all flustered because, let's just be honest, it's June 2nd. You don't have a quarterback. You don't. Who's their quarterback? Mason Rudolph?
Yep.
You don't have a quarterback. And you're dancing with Aaron Rodgers, who's 55 years old, that just tore his Achilles 2 seasons ago, hasn't done anything in years, was sent out of the NFC North by Kirby Joseph. Yeah, I'd be pissed. And this is exactly why the Pittsburgh Steelers are regular season winners. They're just not getting it right. They should have drafted a quarterback a long time ago, but they definitely. Who else do they have on the roster? Do they have Justin Fields? They don't have Justin Fields, do they?
No, Justin Fields is now a Jet.
That's right.
Mason Rudolph and Will Howard. They drafted Will Howard late, I think 6th round or.
Well, I mean, I think Will Howard has ability. If you're thinking about bringing Rodgers in to kind of help, Howard learn, Aaron Rodgers ain't going to do that. He is not going to take these guys under his wing. To your point, about Rodgers being a virus, I think that's exactly what he is. He's at this point in his life now where he's more, absorbed about himself. Like he's all self-absorbed. And I think for any team that he lands on, you can forget about that team winning football games. So I'm less convinced that he even plays this year. And I don't even know why, again, that this is even a subject in national media. I know that Mike Florio spoke about it hotly, over the weekend or last Friday about the whole Aaron Rodgers situation. I don't think it's happening. And if it does happen, he doesn't really need to be in camp, but he should be in camp, or the early camps, voluntary or not. He doesn't need to be there, but I think he should be there. Look, he's done everything that he can possibly do. The guy hasn't won a Super Bowl in 14 years, 13 years? I think that should say something. He kind of led the Packers to be regular season winners and beating up an NFC North that was terrible. Let's just be honest. The NFC North was terrible when Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback of the Packers. They were the best team in the North for the longest because none of us could get our acts together. The Bears still don't have a 4,000-yard quarterback. And we've had nothing but 4,000-yard quarterbacks in Detroit, but we didn't have any wins to go along with it that mattered. And now we matter. Now we have things, that we can say, hey, we're doing the right thing. Not just stats anymore. We're stacking some wins. We're stacking some banners. Not the right ones, but at least we're doing something. But now the NFC North is extremely loaded. There's just a couple of teams that are reloading, trying to get better. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers, I could care less if he plays again. I said the same thing last year. Dude, just ride off, man. Just be done. You're not going to win another Super Bowl. Do you honestly think he's going to win a Super Bowl in Pittsburgh if he does go there?
No way. No way. This is the only way he can add, more attention to himself. And if you're a Steelers fan, first of all, Aaron Rodgers is not it. Kirk Cousins, if you're going to take the lesser of two evils, he's old with a bum Achilles, but at least he's a good culture guy. At least he's going to help your locker room. If you're going to take I'm sorry, if you're not able to get Kirk Cousins, right?
Yeah.
I know he's the backup for the Falcons right now, but there's been rumors around him potentially being the guy if Aaron Rodgers isn't.
He makes way more sense.
For sure.
Way more sense than Aaron Rodgers.
If I'm a Steelers fan, I don't want either. I want to suck this year as much as possible. I'll eat it. I'll just take it on the chin, right? If you're in rebuild mode, go all in on rebuild mode. Put a rookie quarterback. I mean, I don't want to throw a guy to the wolves, but maybe you do. Maybe you play Mason Rudolph, and then you keep Will Howard behind. And if Mason Rudolph really just poops the bed, then you throw Will Howard in there and see what you got in that rookie quarterback. And if he shows up and he shows some glimmers of hope, and you take him and progress him along and see if he could be that guy moving forward. But maybe he isn't, and then for sure that you're in the market for a quarterback in the next draft, and you have the draft in Pittsburgh, and you have the most draft picks. Like I think they have something like 12 draft picks right now for next year's draft. So they are really setting themselves up for a complete rebuild. I think it starts with the quarterback. And if they go into this season with Mason Rudolph, I think that may be one of their best options for the long-term success of that franchise, because you can get an early draft pick. And I've heard other rumors about, there's a one certain quarterback that may or may not come out, Arch Manning, right? Being that generational talent type of quarterback. If we'd be, oblivious to what actually happens in the NFL if we didn't think that teams were already looking forward and starting to posture themselves for that bidding war, basically.
So who's gonna tank this year? Let's go off topic. Who's gonna tank this year just to try to get Arch Manning? And is this Eli Manning number 2, where they're, instead of going into this like Caleb Williams apparently did last year, trying not to go to Chicago? Yeah, we know that Eli didn't want to go. Where didn't he want to go? Which team was it? Which team did Eli not want to go to?
He did not want to go to San Diego.
San Diego, but ended up with the Giants. Okay, so is this the Mannings pre-planning to say, well, he may come out, he may not. It all depends on who's picking first, right?
Yeah.
So who's going to tank? Who do you think is going to intentionally tank to get Arch Manning?
Well, one thing that I will note here is that there is one small caveat to that, and that's that, like you said, Arch Manning doesn't have to come out next year, right? And one of the things the Mannings are well known for, and that they've been on record in saying, is that they value starts in college. And if Arch Manning only plays this next year, he will have only had, I think, like 13 starts in college.
If he plays this year.
If he plays just this 1 year, we know he's going to start this year in Texas, because he didn't start last year, right? He maybe played a couple games, but Quinn Ewers was the starter for the majority of games, so he'll have one full season as the starter, and he could have a ton of success. But is that enough for the Mannings to say, hey, like, you're gonna be you're seasoned enough to go to the NFL and be the guy? Because whoever takes him, that is their future, right? And whether they bring him along like Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre and then Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers, whether they bring him along in that process, or if they just throw him into the fire, right? Like Cam Ward is going to do this year for the Tennessee Titans. It will be hard not to do that if you get Arch Manning. But if you tank this year, and then Arch Manning doesn't come out, whether that's because he wants more time in college to get more, experience under his belt. He's advised by his uncles, right? Eli and Peyton and his grandpa Arch. I don't know, but there's still variables at play here, and he has control over a little bit of that. So you could potentially tank. You could be the Steelers and have an atrocious season, and then be in the market for the quarterback with the first pick, and then still not even have a chance to get him. So you might have to double tank. You might just have to play the long game and say, we're going to suck for the next 2 years to get Arch Manning potentially. I don't know. There's got to be conversations happening within the Manning family about where he would want to go. You just won't hear about it in a book, because the Mannings know how to deal with their business quietly, whereas the Bears guys, they need all the publicity they can get. You want to write a book? Here, talk to my dad. He'll talk to anybody.
All right, so I'm trying to think here for a moment. Steelers and Colts, were they not like big enemies back in the day? When Peyton was playing, like. I mean, they were big rivals, right? I mean, different divisions, but they were still pretty big rivals back then, because the Steelers have always been fairly good. Tomlin was around when Peyton was playing. Would the Mannings really want Arch to go to the Steelers? Simply because of the rivalry that exists?
I would say yes, only because the Steelers are one of those franchises that has such great history and tradition that it's like, like when we think of Steelers, we think of some good quarterbacks. We think of Terry Bradshaw. We think of Ben Roethlisberger. We think of these are some really, when you think of Colts quarterbacks, right? You got Peyton Manning just, is an iconic figure. If you would have told Peyton Manning he's going to go to the Colts before going to the Colts, it's like, bro, I mean, yeah, they have some, but it's like way back is their history. And so,
you can't forget about Charlie Batch playing for the Steelers. I mean, he was one of their best. No, I'm just kidding.
Cordell Stewart was my guy, dude. Oh my goodness. Slash. They called him Slash because he could do more than one position. I wore number 10 when I was in Pop Warner because of Cordell Stewart, because I was playing quarterback, but I was also the best athlete on the team. So yeah.
Well, speaking of Arch Manning for a second here, his rating last year, again, 90 attempts that he threw, 184.
No, a stud.
Killed it.
One of those games was against a not a great opponent, so he shredded them. I can't even remember who exactly it was, but one of the things to note about Arch Manning is my guy is athletic.
Yeah,
he is not Eli and Peyton. If you know the Manning family, there was 3 brothers: Eli, Peyton, and Cooper. Now, Eli and Peyton, they both play quarterback, but Cooper was the wide receiver, and he's the one that got injured and wasn't able to continue his career. But you could tell that Arch Manning is the son of Cooper and not the son of Peyton or Eli, because this dude has wheels. He is an athletic quarterback, and he I won't say reminds me of anybody specific because he's got his own play style. But if you can take, a modern day quarterback and add Peyton Manning's brain in there and Eli Manning's clutch ability, like, dude, I'm all in on that too. Right. And it would be nice to see him perform as the starter next year. It will be nice to see what he does with the whole season and how good he really is. But I think he's got all the tools capable that you need to be a capable NFL quarterback, and one of the better ones that we've seen in a long time. So we'll see how his continued development happens in Texas. But it'll be exciting to watch, and it will be fun for all fans, no matter if you're in the market for a quarterback or not, to watch that Manning debacle play out for the teams that are in the market, because, man, it is going to be a hype fest for sure.
Yeah, speaking of putting together your best quarterback, we're going to continue the series. I called it Build a Bear, but it's build your best, right? Build your best player. We're going to try
if
to
we're
put
building a bear, he can't throw for 4,000 yards.
Right,
Sorry.
right. Yeah. So we're going to call Build a Bear. Well, I don't know what I'm going to call this series, but last week we did one, but every week we were supposed to do one today. We'll probably have to get into it tomorrow, but every week we're going to try to do at least 2 positions. So we'll do corner and safety this week, and then every week we'll do probably defensive end, defensive tackle next week, and then we'll get into offense. So to your point about quarterback, we will be getting into the perfect quarterback soon. I can't wait to actually see where it goes. What did we do last week? Wide receiver?
Yeah, we did wide receiver last week.
We did wide receiver last week, yeah. Okay, I want to show everybody a picture. So we did Pray to Homes this weekend, and probably going to do it a little bit more today. I came across a home that absolutely loved, and they had this little secret room that was like this hideaway speakeasy, and I'm like, okay, this is the podcast setup. Like, this is what I envision the next room to be. Now, I don't drink, but you still got to have the bar, especially for the guests. And like I said to you, Corey, over the weekend, like, you guys can have at the bar whatever you want. But yeah, I'm not a drinker. So let me just show you guys this picture. I thought this was pretty cool. So I'd love just, the doors. You can see how thick those doors are. Like they're a full 6 inches wide. Because this house is built, 2x6. Amazing home. So we're looking at trying to do a barn dominium with a dedicated podcast studio and offices and things of that nature. So what I envision is having, 4 seats just like that, a bar across. There'll be more TVs than just one. There'll be TVs all over. And I'm conflicted. Like, do I leave it nice and I mean, that looks great, or do I deck it all out in lion stuff? I'm a little conflicted, because if I do all lion stuff, then all the other channels that I'll do, I'd have to either take everything down or or do green screen. And I don't want to do green screen. So I don't know. What do you guys think, man? I love it. Corey, what do you think of this idea?
No, I think it's super sleek and yeah, I love the aesthetic. You could do something clean and I'm not exactly sure, but like just something general and clean with some lighting maybe, and then it can offset, whatever you're doing. And depending on where you put your cameras, maybe it's not the entire logo.
There'll be
or
cameras
something.
everywhere. So the way I envisioned it as 360-degree view. So there'll be cameras on the walls, cameras in front, close up, dialing it in. So that way, if I've got 4 people there doing a show, then everyone has their own individual view, and then we have the big view. So yeah, there's going to be at least 6 or 7 cameras is what I'm thinking here. But
yeah, general football decor, like that is not ambiguous, but you can put a couple Lions things in there. Maybe the colors, the lighting is Honolulu blue, right? So an ode to the Lions, but with stylized, so you could do multiple things with the space, right?
I like that dark slate gray, slate black, cool. Because there's something about the stark slate gray and the black that really just pops for a studio. Sure. And then what you're wearing, you obviously can't wear black, but the contrast, it makes you pop off off the screen a little bit. That's why it's hard for me to wear blue when I sit here, and I know I'm not supposed to. I should be wearing lighter colors because I blend with the damn wall.
You mean like me right now?
Yeah, right.
I'm just a floating head.
Let's get into a couple more things. So Bryce Huff, I wanted to bring this up because number one, they had to wait until after June 1st to make this deal go down, I guess. But Bryce Huff is going to apparently get traded to the 49ers. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, number one, he goes to, was it the Eagles last year, right? And just didn't have good success. Let me pull up this article here. So sources say that the 49ers are finalizing a trade for Bryce Huff from the Eagles. And I'm just going to cliff note this article. They're saying that the trade is expected to be finalized this week after the calendar turns to June. Huff was slated to make $16.75 million in the fully guaranteed money in 2025, but the Eagles are going to take on $9.05 million in salary, leaving the Niners to handle the remaining $7.95. So it sounds like they're splitting the baby just to kind of get rid of Huff. San Francisco obviously expected to send a middle round draft pick. So probably talking 3rd, 4th round pick to do this. This was a player that the Detroit Lions fans, a lot of them, wanted in Detroit. This is a player that has been talked about. I can't tell you how many umpteen times in videos over the last couple of seasons. And then there's this guy by the name of Will Rock that has said from day one, this is a player that will never make it to Detroit. And this is a player that doesn't fit in Detroit. And it's not so much character flaws. It's more so the scheme. And so when he played with the Jets and before getting traded to the Eagles, the Jets ran a 4-3 scheme. That is why Bryce Huff had so much success in New York, was because he was in the right scheme that fit him. He moves to the Eagles, and the Eagles run this 3-4 base front primarily. Now they've mixed up some things with a 4-man front, but they primarily run a 3-4. Guess what the 49ers run? A 4-3. Last year, Huff did not have a good season. Matter of fact, he didn't even suit up for any of the playoff games that I could remember. And I think that was mentioned in the article as well. Let me see if I can open this other article. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is because this has been a continued conversation that I've had with Lions fans that visit this channel. When you look for players that you want to add in the offseason, I think what fans get enamored with are stats. And they look at these big gaudy stats. Oh, look at this guy. He had 13 sacks and 69 million pressures and blah, 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 blah. He's going to have to be a perfect fit for Detroit. Brad screwed up by not taking him. Brad screwed up by not going after the guy. Brad screwed up by not spending $25 million on this player. And I'm sitting back just thinking to myself, have you guys looked at the scheme? that he plays in? Because if he's running that scheme and he's having success in that scheme, and then you go throw him into something that's totally different, it's not to say that some players won't have success in multiple schemes, because they do. Personally, I feel by and large that you have to be scheme fit for a reason, and that's because either your tools don't align, maybe your body size doesn't align, your height, weight, speed stuff doesn't align, but more so it's what you do great and how you fit within that scheme that may not work well in a different scheme, meaning the 4-3. So now you're seeing exactly what I've been talking about for 3 seasons now, which is we can't think that every player can be a Detroit Lion for multiple reasons, but the one simple thing is it has to be a schematic fit. If the Lions were running a 3-4 defense last year too, then I would say, yeah, there is probably an opportunity for it. Bryce Huff wasn't that expensive, when he was getting traded. Yeah, he's making, decent amount of money, but he's not breaking the bank in the salary cap. But I'm throwing out the evidence and the proof and having the conversation once again to everybody out there that talks about defensive ends and we have to get this player or that player. Now, again, you have the evidence. This is why. He had a terrible season last year while the rest of the Eagles had an amazing season because they fit the scheme and he didn't. Corey, I've said a lot of that, but you and I haven't really discussed this. I mentioned it this morning and I said, I'm going to talk about the scheme fit. You've played college ball. You've been a coach. Can you affirm what I'm saying is true, or tell us what you think about scheme fit and players and why or why not it works or it doesn't? And then if you could even throw out a percentage of you trying to maybe, or if you've done this, if you've tried to change a player to do something that maybe they haven't done before, how often that it works and doesn't work. Just kind of walk us through some of that.
Well, I mean, I was primarily an offensive coach, so all of my, a lot of my experience surrounds offensive positions. But my brother being a defensive end is a perfect source for this type of information. My brother is a specific type of player, right? 6'3", 265, 270 pounds, power guy, super strong, right? And a 4'7", 740. But his experience was on the line, being the strong side field end, right? And shutting down the run and then collapsing the pocket, making sure that quarterback wasn't going to rush out to the field side. Now that is a very specific role and very specific set of skills that he has, right? Run stopping, those types of things. Now, when he was coming out to the draft, in talks with his agent, you find out, how do you know what team you're going to go to? And one of the very first things he says is obviously roster construction. Who do they have now? Right? Do they need a guy at your position? Because if they're content with what they have, they're not drafting you, period. Right? And then I think maybe the second thing he says is scheme. They're not drafting guys who don't fit the role that they see in their defense, right? And so, to your point, a 3-4 scheme, and I'm pretty sure we have knowledgeable football players, but football fans here, but some of us might not be as knowledgeable. Maybe my dad in Egypt not know this, or my mom. The first number in the scheme of a defense represents defensive linemen, the people that have their hand on the ground in the dirt, right? And the second number represents linebackers, guys who are at the second level. Well, in a 3-4, that's not always the case. That extra linebacker can roll down and play off of the edge. So you'll see it look like there's 4 guys on the defensive line, but in reality, it's a linebacker that's walked up to the line and is going to rush the passer. Now, that linebacker, if he's not rolling down, has to be able to do everything a linebacker does, right? Whereas in a 4-3, right, we have 4 D linemen. 2 of those guys are true defensive ends, like my brother, someone who's going to set an edge and pass rush, right? Stop the run. Rarely are you going to get a true 4-3 defensive end who's going to drop back into coverage and do it very, very well. Now, they will have that in their scheme. You might have a zone blitz where you're overloading one side and dropping off your defensive end into coverage once in a while to change up tendencies, but the majority of the time they are specifically on the line, stopping the run, rushing the passer, doing what you would think a true defensive end does. But in a 3-4, that scheme changes. And now all of a sudden you need a more versatile backer. You need someone maybe a little smaller, a little faster, a little quicker, who doesn't need to take on the run and take on a tackle and take on these, pulling guards, but is able to, run down the line and maybe cover a back out of the backfield and do different types of things. And so it is all that to say, it is extremely important to find the right fit and the right personnel who does what you need done in that job. That's like taking a slot receiver, right, and putting them on the outside. It doesn't translate well, right? Why? Because slot receivers have specific sets of skills that translate well to the inside of the field, to making moves in space and not having press coverage. When you step on the outside and you play on the line as an X receiver, now you have a press corner who's a lot faster and matches up with you differently. So different skills and attributes are valued differently depending on what scheme they're in and where they're at in that scheme. And so, yes, super important. And we'll see how Bryce Huff does. One of the other things to note about the Bryce Huff trade is that he's going back to be with Robert Saleh, right? Who knows who he is, who knows what he has in him. And that's the third variable. It's relationships. Coaches pick their guys. Dan Campbell wants gritty guys. He wants guys that fit the culture, but also fit the scheme, right? Robert Saleh knows what Bryce Huff is, knows how to use Bryce Huff's talents, right? So it makes complete sense to bring him back to a scheme that he knows, to a coach that he knows, to do a job that he already has done and knows how to do. And that is the challenge for GMs, is to find guys who you have limited experience with, who have, only a couple interviews. You only have so much game film to watch. One of the things you can diagnose is what scheme they were in, right? The X's and O's don't necessarily change that much. You can see what this player does well. And then all the intangibles, their characteristics, their personality, who they are as a person, like their work ethic, all those things are the things that, coaches will really have to discern for themselves, and GMs and the organization, to find that perfect fit. But to find the guy that fits a scheme, to fits what you are looking for, it's kind of a plug and play type of thing. And it's one of the easier things to diagnose when scouting and picking a guy that you're going to want to join your team for the future.
So I also want to clarify a couple of things as well. And that's great information. And I'm glad that, we're getting a perspective from you. Everyone's been listening to me for a while, and sometimes I feel like validation is needed, or we need to hear it from somebody else. And that's why we try to get, some good people on, whether they're coaches or players, to kind of get, their ideas, right. And to get that information out. So they're not just always hearing it from me and then thinking that I'm always trying to put these guys in boxes or favoritism or whatever. So what I thought that I heard you say was, number one, if you're in the wrong scheme, it's kind of like this. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. If you're looking for ransom, I can tell you I don't have money, but what I do have are a very particular set of skills I have acquired over a very long career, skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. If you let my daughter go, you see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
I love that taken speech. A certain particular set of skills. That's what we're talking about. When you have a certain particular set of skills, it more or less, it puts you into that box of where you're going to play at the next level. However, you will see there's also a faction of football players that are drafted later in rounds called athletes, right? They're guys that just kind of fit somewhere. We're going to find a position for you. Or maybe guys that are tweeners, right? So that's another word that gets thrown around, tweeners. Those are guys that may fit a 3-4, may fit a 4-3. You don't know yet. You try them out. Maybe they work. Maybe they don't. And if they don't, maybe their second stop is at, a 3-4 if they started in a 4-3 and they didn't have success. So you will see later round guys, UDFAs, that are experimented with or experimenting themselves. Let me put this analogy out there. If you have, I don't know, let's just say you have a pipe leaking in your house. Are you going to call an electrician or are you going to call a plumber? Right? I think you're going to call a plumber. When you're in a 4-3 defense and you're looking for a 4-3 big end, I think you're going to go look for a 4-3 big end or somebody that plays that position really well. That's really about all I wanted to cover with Zadarius Smith. It was more or less to kind of jump off and again kind of explain to people that I think that Brad Holmes is doing the right thing. I know he's doing the right thing. He's finding the right football players to fit the scheme. He's finding the right football players to fit the culture and the identity. And I feel like a lot of fans are getting sick of hearing that. And we talk about it a lot, but it's working. It's because it's the right thing to do. Just because it's not your player doesn't mean he's getting it wrong, right? Just because we didn't win a Super Bowl yet doesn't mean that he's drafting the wrong guys. Fair assumption?
Yeah, I think he's drafting the right guys. He drafted my brother. I honestly think, and this is like a slightly biased take, but like what my brother does well is what the Lions need at that other end. And so if he can, do what he does and earn some playing time, I think that they'll see that like there is a method to the madness, and especially when you take into account everything else we've been talking about, Brad, and how he's looking towards the future, and he's looking at contracts, and he's looking at money, and he's, you got to find that the young talent that can perform the role that you're looking for. And if we have questions with Marcus Davenport and his health, and these other questions about money later on down the line and paying Aiden, then it would make sense to take advantage or address both of those issues in one pick, potentially in a 6th round guy with all the upside in the world, right? And a low cost to invest in and see what could happen, right? A big 4-3 end who's looks enormous right now. And I know he loves to be in the weight room, so he's strong as heck. If he can get the gist of the play calling and the NFL speed and the scheme, yeah, he's gonna be a menace, and we're gonna see that pretty soon coming up here in these preseason games. And so I'm super excited to see how the defensive end situation plays out. Obviously, my personal investment in the position, but I just think it's to watch a good plan play out, from a GM, from an offensive game plan scheme. Like football is so fun because you strategize and you prepare, and then you go out there and do it, whether that's over the course of a game, over the course of a season, over the course of a career, a tenure for a GM. It's amazing to watch, the trajectory and how it all plays out. And I think from what we've seen, it's all been successful. And I think, it's going to continue to be that way. I know if Ahmed has anything to do with it, he's going to make sure to put his stamp on the field. So, I'm excited to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it too. And I think that the thing that we need to understand and look at too is when you look at the future, and I'm not saying, Ahmed won't get a chance at being a starter or whatever, but let's just say for right now, it's backup, right?
Yeah.
As you move on through the future and you look at the players that are on the roster now and some of them that could be aging out, if Marcus Davenport has an extremely good season, well, that might propel him up to get, a bigger contract. And I think that, over time, you're going to need backups that can slide right in. And if you've got an inexpensive option that you drafted, then it works. So the depth of this roster is extremely important in having guys like Ahmed or others, right, being able to do a job. You would love to have 4 guys that can rotate, 75-25 or 65-35, where your top 2 starters are getting the majority of snaps, and then the backups are filling in as much as they need to, keeping those starters fresh. So when you get deep into the 4th quarter or maybe in overtime, that those guys can go all out. Same thing we see with running backs. You see more and more teams go into a 2-back system because they're keeping those legs fresh. Like we've seen in, overtime, David Montgomery just ran it down the throat like 9 times in a row. All right, we're up against the clock. I didn't realize it was after 10 o'clock already.
Oh, it's all good.
Yeah. So let's sign off for the day. Final 30 to you, and then can't wait to get back after this tomorrow.
Yeah, my final 30 today is going to be a little bit random. I talked to my brother yesterday in Egypt, my other brother, the littlest one, Ibrahim, and he said, Corey, and then his English, Corey, I want you. And then he got broken. And he basically wants me to give him a shout out. So this is a shout out to my brother, Ibrahim Hassanin. He says, tell them I'm going to be the next Ahmed. I said, okay, bud, I can't wait. He's in the gym. He's getting strong. He's
How old is he?
Now you're putting me on the spot. I want to say like 14. So just like a little bit behind where Ahmed was when he first came from Egypt to America. He's getting after it over there. And yeah, he is super motivated. He watches the show with my dad. And so he's like, Cody, say my name. I want to hear my name. And so I said, okay, brother, Ibrahim Hassanin, this is for you, dude. And yeah, gonna get some love in the chat, I'm sure. He wants to be an American football player as well now, because who wouldn't want to be when you watch your brother go from your home in Egypt to the TV, in America. So it's a cool thing for him, and it's cool to have them watching. So I appreciate, the opportunity to do that for them. One of the cool things about, streaming live on the internet is that you can watch from anywhere. And we appreciate you guys all watching from wherever you're at, whether that's in Egypt, California, waking up early. We appreciate you guys being here, and I appreciate being here. So that's it. That's my 30, and way longer than 30, I'm sure.
Hey, it's all good. So if you guys want Ibrahim to be that next NFL rookie landing on Detroit Lions turf in Allen Park, subscribe to the channel today, because he wants you to, right? Ibrahim, I wish you the best of luck. We need status updates. So we're going to have to see some status, pictures, something, how you're doing through your career here. I hope it takes off for you. There was something about flag football that we were going to talk about today.
Oh,
but it was in Egypt.
The flag football championships are going to be in Egypt. Yeah. And if you'd think that's a coincidence by the NFL, they got their first NFL football player from Egypt, and now they're going to be doing. I'm telling you, the game is huge over there, and Egypt has always been an ambassador to that region for the United States, and so I think it is only right to have the growth of the game happening in that country as it grows in that area of the world. So I think it's an amazing thing, and I know Ahmed's going to be involved with that somehow. I just know it.
I love it. Well, all right, great work today. We got to sign off. We'll see you guys back here on the Rise and Grind Morning Show tomorrow. I think we got 2, maybe 4 topics today.
And there's only 2 of us. We can talk forever.
It's all good. Look, hopefully you guys are liking the way that the show is going. We're trying to inject a little bit more energy and get into some more topics. Email us, mailbag@rockdown.com, for 2 reasons. Number 1, we're going to be starting a game show, and we're working out the kinks and trying to figure out exactly what it's going to be. But you're going to have to appear live with us for the game show. You can join by audio. You can join by video. So mailbag@rockdown.com. Make sure that you lock it in right now into a contact, because you're going to need it when we call on contestants to get in. So that's it. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow morning. Take care.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit.